So in this video, we will learn about something new, Java records. But before we start Java record, we'll take a quick look at something called POJO, which is actually an acronym for plain old Java objects. There's nothing special about POJOs, but there is a general pattern that we use to create a POJO, and they are generally used to pass around the data from one class to another class. So we will quickly see what exactly is a POJO. So here we see that we have created a class trade, and we know that this trade has two properties, an integer property trade ID and string property fund. Then we see that we have two set methods basically to set the fund and trade ID properties, and similarly we have two get methods, and from these get methods we are returning trade ID and fund respectively. So the idea is to create a class, simple class, then define the properties and make them private so that it is not accessible to anyone outside of this class. The only way you can set and get a certain property is via setter and getter method. So this actually represents a POJO. And how do we use a POJO? So if we go to the main method, we see that we are initializing a new trade object. Then because the variables are private, so to set the property, we are calling the setter. Then we may be passing the same object to some other class or some other method for further processing. But here we have a simple method process trade that accepts the trade argument. And in this method, we are simply getting back the properties using the getter methods, and we are simply printing them. And if we run the main method, so we see processing trade and the details of the trade object. So that's how we create a POJO, and that's how we use the POJO. That's how we pass the details from one method to another method or to another classes. Now I hope you see the problem. So for example, this is a simple class. It only has two properties, but even with two properties, we have to write so much code just to provide setters and getters. And actually, Java record is a new feature in Java that simplifies this very thing. So with Java records, we can create this kind of POJO in a very clean and simple way, and we will see how to do that. But this was a short introduction of POJO so that we can understand the difference between a POJO and a record. So I'll see you in the next video. That's it for now. Thank you. So in this video, we will see how to create a record and how to use them. Here I have created a new record in advance so that we can compare the POJO and the record, but the process is same. You simply create a new file with .java extension, you give it a name. The only difference is that here we use the keyword record. When we create a class, the keyword is class, but when we are creating a record, we are using the keyword record. Then in the case of class, we simply write the name of the class and curly braces. But here with the record, we see a set of parentheses following the name of the record, which looks like a constructor. And that is the difference between actually a record and the trade. So if we consider the POJO when we wrote the trade class, and we see that we defined two properties as the body of that class, and then we wrote setters and getters. But in case of record, we can use a compact form to define the properties and to auto generate the setters and getters so that we don't have to do that thing. So for example, if we have to define the same set of properties but with record, then we provide the properties within this parenthesis, which looks like a constructor. So let's see that. We define the property in trade ID and string fund. That's it. Now, if we run the code, if we try to use the record, what Java compiler will do, it will create two properties, two instance variables within this record, and it will generate the getter methods automatically. In the case of record, there are no setter methods. So the only way to initialize values is to pass on the values when we are instantiating record via constructor. After that, we can only get the values. We cannot set the values. So records are immutable. They cannot change their state once instantiated. Now let's try to use the record. So record. Now trade record. We need to create the object tr equals to new trade record. Now here, because it looks like a constructor, it functions like a constructor. So we need to pass the values. So we pass the trade ID 345 and fund, the name of the fund. That's it. Now, if we create a method, let's say process record tr, and if we have to access the properties, processing trade record, then tr dot. Now here we don't see the method with the pattern get, and that is the next difference. So the getters generated by the compiler, they don't have get in their name. So the properties, you get the method name same as the property. So whatever property that we define trade ID, the method will have the same name. So here we have the getters with the name of the property. Similarly, for the fund, we have the method fund. Now let's run the same method again. And we see there is actually no difference. We see the ID and the fund. Just to recap, we use the keyword record, then we pass the values here in the parentheses, which is a shortcut for a compact constructor. Then there is no need to write the setters and getters, and no need to declare the variables that we used to do in case of classes with the access modifier, and everything else will be generated by the compiler automatically. The way we create the object it is exactly the same, but we cannot set anything. We can get the values, but the method name will not have the get in their name. It will be same as the name of the property. So in the upcoming videos, we will cover few more things on the record. That's it for now. Thank you. In this video, we will see what else can we do with a record. So the body of the record looks empty, but the things will be generated by the compiler automatically. The thing that we will be focusing on is the constructor. We can write a constructor for a record, but that looks slightly different. So let's see that. Generally, what we do, we write the access modifier, then name of the class. So for example, trade record, then we put the parentheses and the curly braces. That's how we write the constructor traditionally. But that doesn't work with the record. In case of record, we don't write the parentheses. We simply write the name of the class and the curly braces. This is actually called compact constructor, but it has the same function. If we put a print message, then it will be called when we are creating a new instance of this record. So I have cleaned the main method a bit. I've removed the POJO usage. So it is now simply creating the new object of trade record. And if we run the method now, So we see the message from the constructor that the constructor called. So the functionality is basically the same. The only difference is we don't give the parentheses anymore, and the name of this constructor is called compact constructor. That's how we can write the constructor in a record. Similarly, a trade record or simply a record can have private and static and public methods. It is same as the class. So I can have a method, let's say a private method, private void work, maybe a public method, public void do something, and a static method, do work. So a record can have a compact constructor, a record can have a private method, a public method, or and a static method. And we can call the methods on the record object. So let's say if we call the instance method do something, we do this like, and if we have to call the static method, we use the name of the record, then do work. So this is practically same. There are no differences. So here we saw how to write a constructor and how to write different type of messages in the record. In the next video, we will see something else on the record. That's it for now. Thank you. We know that the attributes that we want a record to have, we can declare them as part of a record declaration, and everything else will be taken care of by the compiler. So the actual declaration of instance variables, the getters and setters, sorry, not the setters, but only the getter, will be generated by the compiler. And we also said that a record is immutable, means once initialized, it cannot change its state. But we also know that if we are providing two variables here, then compiler will generate the declaration for two instance variables with access modifiers, data type, and the name of the variable. So that also means that this variable or these variables in this case, they should be accessible within this record. So we should be able to access them. And if we can access them, can we change them? So for example, if in this instance method, public void do something, if I try to access uh, the these properties, then I should be able to do it, right? So if I say this dot trade ID and this dot fund ID, sorry, just the fund, then it's valid because these are the properties of this record, same as we define variables in classes. So if we can access them, can we change them? So let's say I want to set something static in the trade ID. Can we do that? So if we see here, uh, if we notice the warning by the IDE, it says that cannot assign a value to the final variable. It means whatever properties we declare as part of record declaration, they all are final variables. Final variables means they are essentially a constant. So once we give them a value as part of the trade instantiation process, the value cannot be changed. Even if we are able to access them, we cannot change the value. So the values are final, and that means they are constant. All right. So that's it for now. Thank you. In this video, we will understand the inheritance with records, what is allowed and what's not allowed. So I have cleaned up my record. So basically removed all the old methods that I defined as part of the demo. And I have created a couple of classes. So first of all, there is an entity class and it has a simple method, sum method. Similarly, I have a new interface loggable and it has a single method log. Then we have another class with the name subtrade class, and then a record subrecord which has a single property, an integer property num. Now we will see what's possible. If can a particular record extend another record? Can it extend another class? Can it implement an interface? So we will see all these things one by one. So let's start with interface. We'll see, can a record implement an interface? So here we have the interface loggable, and we'll try to implement this loggable interface from the trade record. So if we try to do that with implements keyword and loggable, so we see because we have to provide the missing implementation, and okay, so we see it's allowed. A record can implement an interface. So here this particular trade record is implementing the loggable interface, and due to that it is providing the implementation of log method. All right, so we can implement an interface. So let's close it and move on. Now if we can implement the interface, can we also extend a class? So let's say the trade record wants to extend the entity class. Can we do that? So let's see that. If we say extends entity, then there is an error. It says no extends clause allowed for record. So that means a record cannot extend any other class. This is not allowed. It can only implement an interface, but it cannot extend another class. So let me undo that and close this as well. Now we know that a record cannot extend another class. But what about another class? Can another class inherit a record? So let's say we have another class subtrade record and we want to extend from the trade record. So can we do that? Let's try that as well. So we are saying that we want to extend from a certain record, but as we see, this is not allowed. So even if we do that, because we know that the trade record will have a constructor with two properties, and because the compiler cannot generate the parameterized constructor on its own in case of inheritance, and we are saying that we want this class to extend from the record. So basically, to satisfy the inheritance property, we'll have to create a constructor manually so that we can call the super. All right, but even if we do that, we see that we cannot inherit from the record because we said that records are immutable. That means they cannot change the state, and records are final. So it's like, okay, let me do that. So first of all, they are final, and we cannot inherit from final classes. So the bottom line is a record cannot extend another class, and similarly, because it is immutable, it is final, some other class cannot extend record. So when we declare or when we create a record, it is essentially same as declaring as a final class. So for example, if we want to declare a final class, we use final keyword class and final class, something like that. So it is done by the Java compiler. So it enforces that it is final and nobody can extend from the record. So let's undo the change and move on. Now we know that just to recap, we know that a record can implement an interface. It cannot extend from another class, and some other class cannot extend from a record. But can a record extend from another record? So here we have another record name with name subrecord and an integer property. This is a record. We know that because it has the record keyword. So now we will check, can a record extend another record? So if we try to extend from the trade record, we see that it's not allowed. And the reason is same because records are final, so nobody can inherit from a record. All right. So that covers everything related to records. And just to recap, so when we provide some properties as part of declaration, they are treated as internal properties, internal variables, and the getters and setters are generated by the compiler itself. After that, we can access the variables, but we cannot change them. We can have different types of methods in a record, and records are final, so they cannot be extended any other class or any other record. If they try to extend from the record, it will be a compile time error. Similarly, a record cannot extend from another class. So they cannot inherit another class. They cannot override methods from another class, but they are allowed to implement an interface. So that concludes everything on the records. And that's it for now. Thank you.